I wasn't at my sister-in-law's wedding. I wasn't invited, and when she opened my gift, she screamed. The strange part is, I didn't feel shocked. I didn't feel angry. I felt calm, almost relieved. That's what still confuses people when I tell them this. They expect rage, or tears, or something loud. But what I felt was quiet, like something heavy had finally been set down. If you're watching this, you're probably wondering why a woman would accept being banned from her own family's wedding without a fight, and why she would send a gift anyway. And what kind of gift could silence a room full of smiling guests in formal clothes? I promise you, I'll explain. Not to justify myself, not to paint anyone as a villain, just to help you understand how someone gets to a moment like that without ever raising her voice. This happened 2 years ago, in late spring. The wedding was held at a vineyard just outside the city, one of those places with white folding chairs, eucalyptus garlands, and handwritten signs about love and forever. I remember the date clearly, because it was the same weekend I packed my husband's things into boxes and lined them up by the door. But I didn't do that yet. Not then. At the time, I was still married, still wearing my ring, still answering his calls, still believing that if I stayed calm enough, patient enough, things would make sense again. His name was Daniel. We'd been together for 6 years, married for 3. I was 29 then, old enough to trust my judgment, young enough to believe that trust was always rewarded. His sister, Lena, was getting married to her college sweetheart. Big wedding, big guest list, big family expectations. I'd helped her pick out invitations. I'd gone dress shopping with her. I knew which song she'd chosen for her first dance. So when Daniel told me I wasn't welcome at the wedding, it didn't sound real at first. It sounded like something he'd take back after a pause, like a sentence that hadn't been thought through. But he didn't take it back. He said it gently. That was the worst part. He said it like he was protecting me, like this was for my own good, like there were complications and feelings and timing issues that didn't need to be discussed right now. I remember nodding while he spoke. I remember noticing how steady my hands were. I remember thinking, very clearly, that this was not the moment I would lose myself. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't call Lena to demand an explanation. I just asked one question. Do you really think this is the best choice? Daniel didn't answer right away. He looked past me. Then he said yes. That was when I decided to send a gift. Not out of spite. Not out of revenge. But because there were things that needed to be acknowledged. And I knew, deep down, that they wouldn't stay hidden forever. If you stay with me, I'll tell you how I got there and why sometimes silence speaks louder than confrontation. Before everything unraveled, my life felt settled. Not perfect, just steady in the way you trust without checking your footing. Daniel and I lived in a small townhouse on a quiet street where everyone waved, but no one really talked. We had mismatched coffee mugs from places we'd visited together, a calendar on the fridge with color-coded notes, and a routine that felt earned. Sunday grocery runs, Tuesday takeout, Friday nights on the couch pretending we'd watch a movie and falling asleep halfway through. I believed in that life. I believed in him. Daniel was the kind of man people trusted quickly. Soft-spoken, polite. He listened more than he talked, and when he did speak, it always sounded reasonable. That was one of the things I loved about him. I'd grown up around chaos, raised by a single mom who worked too much and worried too loudly. Daniel felt like the opposite of that. Calm, predictable, safe. His family felt safe too, especially Lena. She was younger than Daniel by 2 years, bright in a way that pulled attention without trying. We weren't best friends, but we were comfortable. We texted. We shared inside jokes. When Daniel and I got married, she cried harder than anyone else in the room. So when she got engaged, I was happy for her. Genuinely. I went with her to tastings and fittings. I helped her make seating charts and talked her down from a meltdown over flower colors that no one would notice. At least, that's what I thought my role was. Looking back, there were small moments that didn't fit. Nothing dramatic. Just pauses. Like the time Lena went quiet when I mentioned a double date after the wedding. or how Daniel started taking phone calls from her in the other room, or how conversations stopped when I walked into the kitchen during family gatherings. I noticed. I just didn't assign meaning. Because here's the truth. I trusted them. Both of them. And when you trust people, you don't interrogate every change in tone. You assume good intentions. You fill in gaps with kindness instead of suspicion. Inside, I felt secure. Proud, even. I thought I had built something solid. A marriage where problems were discussed, not hidden. A family that accepted me not just as Daniel's wife, but as part of the unit. That belief made me generous with excuses. Daniel said he was stressed from work. Lena said wedding planning was overwhelming. His mother said emotions ran high before big events. All of it sounded reasonable. Normal. And I wanted normal. The weeks leading up to the wedding were busy. Lena was everywhere. Group chats, fittings, last-minute changes. Daniel started coming home later than usual, always apologetic, always calm. I never smelled perfume, never saw lipstick, never caught anything obvious, just distance. I remember one evening, folding laundry on the bed while Daniel showered. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced at it without thinking. Lena's name. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The screen lit up just long enough for me to see that whatever she'd sent wasn't about table numbers or linens. It was a long message. I told myself it meant nothing. That siblings leaned on each other during stressful times. That I was being paranoid. Still, my chest tightened. Just a little. Now let me ask you something before I go further. Have you ever had that gut feeling that something was off, but you ignored it because you didn't want to believe it? Tell me in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone in this. That night, Daniel came out of the bathroom smiling, towel around his waist, acting like everything was exactly as it should be. He kissed my forehead, asked if I wanted tea. I said yes. I didn't mention the message. I didn't mention the distance. I didn't mention the way his eyes seemed to slide away from mine just a second too early. I went to bed believing that if something was wrong, it would surface on its own. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do is wait for honesty to volunteer itself. And that was the version of me I was then, patient, trusting, and still convinced that love meant giving people the benefit of the doubt, even when your instincts whispered otherwise. The first real crack didn't come with shouting or accusations. It came quietly, disguised as logistics. About 3 weeks before the wedding, Lena asked Daniel if he could help her with something at the venue. Just the two of them. She texted him directly, even though I was standing right next to him on the couch when the message came in. He read it, paused, then typed back. I asked, casually, what she needed help with. Just stuff, he said. Wedding stuff. That was it. No details. No follow-up. I watched his face as he sent the message. Not because I was suspicious, at least not consciously, but because something about his posture had changed. His shoulders were tense, his jaw tight. He looked careful. That night, he told me he'd be out late the next day. Venue prep. Family dinner after. Probably wouldn't be worth me coming along. That was new. Before, Daniel always assumed I'd come. Or at least asked. This time, he framed it like a favor to me. Like he was sparing me something tedious. I nodded. Said okay. Told him to drive safe. Inside, something shifted. The next afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. Not in a dramatic way. I didn't snoop or confront. I just checked Lena's social media. She was posting stories from the venue. She was there with bridesmaids. Her mother. Her planner. No Daniel. I told myself the timing might be off. That he'd be there later. That social media didn't show everything. But that evening, when Daniel came home, he smelled like white wine and citrus. Vineyard smells. He looked relaxed. Almost lighter than he'd been in weeks. How was it? I asked. Fine, he said. Productive. I waited. He didn't elaborate. That night, after he fell asleep, I lay awake replaying small moments I'd brushed past before. The late nights. The phone calls that ended when I entered the room. The way Lena avoided eye contact with me now, like guilt or fear, I couldn't tell which. The next day, I ran into Lena at a cafe near her office, completely unplanned. She froze when she saw me, like she'd been caught doing something wrong. We hugged, awkwardly. We talked about nothing. Coffee, weather, her dress alterations. I asked, gently, how venue prep had gone. She blinked. Oh, good. Daniel was really helpful. The lie was small, but it was a lie. I didn't call her out. I smiled, took a sip of my coffee, let the moment pass, because by then, my instincts weren't whispering anymore. They were steady, clear, almost calm. Something was happening behind my back, something that involved my husband and his sister, and whatever it was, they both believed I didn't see it. That realization didn't make me angry right away. It made me observant. I started paying attention to patterns instead of excuses, timing instead of tone, consistency instead of reassurance. 2 days later, Daniel forgot his tablet at home. It chimed while I was cleaning the kitchen. I didn't rush to it. I stood there for a long moment, breathing, deciding what kind of person I wanted to be. Then I picked it up. The message preview wasn't explicit. It didn't need to be. Did you tell her yet? I didn't open it. I didn't scroll. I didn't read further. I already knew enough. I set the tablet back down exactly where it was, finished the dishes, folded a load of laundry, moved through the house like everything was normal. Because here's the thing no one tells you. Sometimes, the moment you realize the truth, you don't want answers anymore. You want confirmation. You want to see how far people will go to protect a lie you're no longer part of. So I waited. Paused for a second. What would you have done in my position? Would you have confronted him right then? Or waited and watched? Drop your answer below. I really want to know. That night, Daniel told me the guest list had changed slightly. That Lena was stressed. That there might be some awkwardness at the wedding. I asked him what he meant. He smiled. I'll explain later. Later never came. And in that space, between what I was told and what I could feel, I understood something important. The truth wasn't hiding from me anymore. It was being actively kept away. I didn't sleep much after that. Not because I was spiraling, but because my mind had shifted into a different mode. Observation. Inventory. I wasn't looking for proof anymore. I was mapping reality. The next few days felt like living beside my own life instead of inside it. Daniel moved around me easily, affection still intact on the surface. He kissed my cheek when he left for work. Asked if I needed anything from the store. Talked about normal things, traffic, deadlines, a show we were halfway through watching. But there was a new layer underneath it all. A kind of carefulness. Like every word he chose had been weighed first. 2 nights later, he told me he was meeting Lena again. Final details. Stress management. He said it like a script he'd rehearsed. I asked if I should come. He hesitated. Just a beat. Barely noticeable. But I caught it. It might be uncomfortable, he said finally, with everything going on. What everything? I asked. He looked at me for a long moment, then shook his head. Not now. That was the first time I felt real pain. Not sharp, not explosive, just a hollow drop in my chest, like missing a step you thought was there. Because couples don't say not now about important things. They say it when they are postponing honesty. The confirmation came the following morning. I work from home, so I'm usually the one who brings the mail in. That day, there was an envelope addressed to Daniel, sent to our house, with Lena's handwriting on it. Thick paper. Heavy. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Later that afternoon, Daniel called me from work. His voice was unusually gentle. Hey, he said, can we talk tonight? About the wedding? My stomach tightened. I told him yes. When he came home, he didn't sit next to me. He chose the chair across the room. That distance told me more than his words ever could. He said Lena was under a lot of stress. That family dynamics were complicated. That emotions had gotten tangled in ways no one intended. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. She doesn't feel comfortable having you there. I waited. At the wedding, he added. It's just too much right now. I asked him why. He didn't answer directly. He said things like boundaries and timing and keeping the peace. He said it would be better if I skipped it. Just this once. I asked him if this was his idea or hers. Another pause. That doesn't matter. He said that IT mattered. I looked at him then, really looked, and realized he wasn't confused. He wasn't torn. He'd already chosen. And whatever he and Lena had created together, it required my absence to survive. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I nodded, slowly, like I was absorbing instructions. Okay, I said. He looked relieved. That was the moment my heart finally broke. I need you to understand, this wasn't just betrayal. This was my whole life collapsing. Have you ever been blindsided like this? If you've been there, share your story below. We heal better together. That night, after he went to bed, I sat alone in the living room. I replayed 6 years of memories, not with nostalgia, but with clarity. I saw the cracks I'd ignored, the loyalty I'd assumed, the way I'd folded myself into his family without ever questioning whether there was space for me when it mattered. And that's when something unexpected happened. The pain stopped escalating. Instead of falling apart, I felt myself pulling inward, gathering, like grief had reached its limit and handed the reins to something colder, calmer. I knew two things with absolute certainty. I would not beg for a place I'd already earned, and I would not pretend this hadn't happened. If I wasn't going to be present at that wedding, my absence would still be felt. Not loudly, not cruelly, just truthfully. That was the night I decided there would be a gift. Not as an act of revenge, but as an act of acknowledgement. Because lies depend on silence, and I was done being quiet. Once the decision settled in me, everything slowed down. That surprised me. I expected urgency, adrenaline, some dramatic shift. But what I felt instead was control returning, piece by piece, like circulation after numbness. I didn't confront Daniel again. There was nothing left to ask that wouldn't invite more half answers. He'd made his choice clear, even if he refused to name it. And I understood something important about myself in that quiet space. I didn't need his confession to validate my reality. I needed my dignity intact. So I focused on what I could control. I handled logistics the way I always had. Calm, methodical. I canceled my hair appointment for the wedding weekend. Returned the dress I'd bought months earlier. I sent Lena a short text congratulating her and wishing her happiness. She replied with a heart emoji and nothing else. That told me enough. Then I thought about the gift. At first, I considered something simple. Something neutral. A check in an envelope. A crystal vase. The kind of present that disappears into a thank you note and never gets discussed again. But that didn't sit right. Not because I wanted to hurt anyone, but because pretending nothing had happened felt like participating in the lie. And I was done doing that. The gift needed to be honest. That was my only rule. I spent a long afternoon alone at home, notebook open, writing and crossing things out. Not planning revenge, planning clarity. I asked myself one question over and over. What would I want if the roles were reversed and the truth was slipping away from me? The answer wasn't punishment. It was recognition. I decided the gift wouldn't accuse. It wouldn't expose in a cruel way. It would simply exist, unaltered, undeniable, impossible to ignore once seen. Something that couldn't be explained away with words like stress or misunderstanding. I gathered what I needed slowly, carefully. I didn't rush. I wasn't emotional when I did it. I felt precise, like someone documenting a fact, not arguing a case. Daniel noticed the distance, of course. He asked if I was okay, if I needed space, if I was angry. I told him I was fine. That wasn't a lie. Not exactly. I was past anger. Anger still wants something. An apology, a reaction, a reversal. What I felt was resolve. And resolve doesn't ask permission. The night before the wedding, Daniel packed his suit and left early to stay with his parents. He said it would make things easier in the morning. I helped him fold his shirt. When he left, the house felt quieter than I expected. Not emptier, just still. Like a room after furniture has been moved out and you can finally see the shape of it. I slept well that night. The morning of the wedding, I woke up early, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with the gift box in front of me. Wrapped neatly. Simple paper. No dramatic bow. Just my handwriting on the tag. I hesitated once. Not out of fear, but out of consideration. Was this necessary? I thought about the months I'd spent trusting people who were actively excluding me. About the way my absence was being framed as convenience instead of consequence. About how easy it would be for them to rewrite the story later, once I was no longer present to contradict it. Yes, I decided. It was necessary. I arranged for the gift to be delivered to the venue during the reception, when everyone would be gathered. When smiles would be wide. When pretending would be hardest. Then I let it go. I didn't track it. I didn't wait by my phone. I didn't imagine reactions. Instead, I went for a long walk. I turned my phone on silent. I let the day pass like any other. Here's where I made my choice. Do you believe in revenge or in walking away? When someone destroys your trust, what's the right move? Comment below. I want both sides. I wasn't walking away from the truth. I was delivering it. And once it was out of my hands, I felt something unexpected. Peace. Because whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. I would never again make myself smaller to protect someone else's lie. The moment didn't come to me. I came to it later. I found out what happened at the wedding from someone else's voice shaking on the phone. It was Daniel's cousin. We weren't close, but we'd always been friendly. She called me that afternoon, hours after the ceremony was supposed to start. I almost didn't answer. Something told me to. Emily, she said, barely breathing. Are you okay? I told her I was fine. Asked why. There was a pause. Then she said something happened. According to her, the reception had been moving along like every other wedding. Toasts, laughter, clinking glasses, Lena glowing, Daniel sitting with family, relaxed enough to smile. Then it was time for gifts. The coordinator brought them out in neat stacks. Cards read aloud. Boxes opened. Thank yous given. Routine. Until mine. Simple wrapping. My handwriting. Lena smiled when she saw my name. A tight smile, but still a smile. She made a small comment about how thoughtful it was that I'd sent something anyway. She opened the box. Inside wasn't anything flashy. No electronics. No jewelry. Just a neatly bound folder. Thick. Heavy. She flipped it open. And then she screamed. Not a gasp. Not a cry. A scream. People froze. Music stopped. Chairs scraped. Someone dropped a glass. Daniel stood up so fast his chair tipped backward. Lena kept staring at the pages like they were moving, like they might rearrange themselves if she looked long enough. She tried to close the folder. Her hands were shaking too hard. Her fiancé asked what it was. She didn't answer. Daniel reached for it. She yanked it away. That's when the room went quiet. The folder contained printed screenshots, dates, messages, photos, timelines. Nothing annotated. Nothing explained. Just facts, laid out cleanly. Conversations between Daniel and Lena that crossed every boundary they pretended didn't exist. Not explicit enough to be illegal. Clear enough to be undeniable. Daniel didn't speak. He couldn't. His face had gone pale in a way I'd never seen before. Someone asked me where I was. That's when the screaming started again. Not from Lena this time. Her mother. The coordinator tried to intervene. The music tried to start back up. It didn't matter. The truth doesn't blend into background noise. I need to pause here. This is the moment everything changed. Be honest. Are you rooting for me right now? Or do you think I went too far? Tell me in the comments. I can take it. The wedding didn't end gracefully. People left early. Whispers followed them out to the parking lot. Phones came out. Stories spread. Daniel didn't come home that night. I didn't call him. I didn't check social media. I sat on the couch with a blanket and watched the sky change color through the window. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I felt steady, because for the first time in weeks, I wasn't the only one holding the truth alone. The next morning, my phone was full. Missed calls, messages, apologies, accusations, silence from the one person who mattered. I didn't respond. Exposure wasn't the end goal. Clarity was. And now, there was nothing left to explain. The days after the wedding felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful, just empty of noise. Like the air after a storm has passed and everyone is still deciding what to say about it. Daniel came back 3 days later. He didn't knock. He used his key, like muscle memory hadn't caught up with reality yet. I was in the kitchen, making tea. He stopped when he saw me, like he wasn't sure I was real. We didn't hug. We didn't argue. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically, just reduced. Like a version of himself that had lost authority. I didn't know you would do that, he said. I waited. You humiliated my family, he added, softer. Less certain. I set my mug down and finally looked at him. I wasn't there, I said. I couldn't have humiliated anyone. That was the closest thing to an argument we had. He tried to explain. Not the messages. That part was suddenly undeniable. But the intent. The context. The confusion. He said nothing physical had happened. That emotions got out of hand. That boundaries blurred. That stress played tricks on everyone. I didn't interrupt. Because explanations are only useful when they change the facts. These didn't. I asked him one question. Just one. Were you going to tell me? He didn't answer. That silence did what the wedding couldn't. It ended the marriage. He moved out the next day. No dramatic exit. Just boxes. Shirts. Shoes. A toothbrush left behind like an oversight. Lena didn't contact me. Her fiancé called once. Apologized for something that wasn't his fault. Said the wedding photos would probably never be printed. I told him I was sorry. I meant it. In the weeks that followed, I learned what it's like to grieve something while also being relieved it's over. I missed the version of my life I thought I had. I didn't miss the people who had protected a lie inside it. Friends checked in. Some carefully. Some too much. Everyone wanted to know how I was holding up. I told them the truth. I'm okay. Just recalibrating. That word became important to me. Recalibrating. Not rebuilding. Not recovering. Adjusting to reality instead of fantasy. I found a new rhythm. Morning walks. Therapy appointments I'd postponed for years. Dinners alone that felt awkward at first and then satisfying. I stopped explaining myself to people who didn't deserve the details. One afternoon, weeks later, I found the wedding invitation still tucked into a drawer. I stared at it for a long time before throwing it away. It felt like letting go of a future that had never actually existed. Looking back now, I wonder if I'd do it the same way again. What about you? Was the pain necessary to become who you are today? Let me know below. I don't feel proud of what happened. Pride isn't the right word. I feel aligned. Aligned with my instincts, my boundaries, my worth. Some losses don't hollow you out. They make room. And in that space, quiet, unoccupied, honest, I finally started to hear myself again. If you've stayed with me this long, I want to speak to you directly now, not as someone telling a story, but as someone who learned something the hard way. For a long time after everything ended, I kept asking myself the same question. Why didn't I see it sooner? Not because I blamed myself, but because I wanted to understand where trust turns into self-abandonment. Here's what I've learned. Love doesn't require you to shrink, loyalty doesn't ask you to dissipate, and peace should never come at the cost of your voice. I didn't win. This wasn't a victory. It was an ending. And endings don't need to be loud to be final. They just need to be honest. I forgave Daniel eventually, not because he deserved it, but because I didn't want to carry him with me anymore. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't reconciliation. It's release. As for Lena, I don't wish her harm. I wish her clarity. The kind that arrives when excuses stop working and you're left alone with yourself. What I do wish for you, for anyone listening, is this. Pay attention to the moments where you start explaining away your own discomfort. Those moments matter. They're information. They're not drama. They're data. So here's my final question. Is it better to forgive and move on, or to make sure they understand exactly what they lost? There's no wrong answer. Drop it in the comments. So that's my story. folks. If it resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far Emily Parker's voice travels. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't to fight for what's broken, but to walk away carrying your truth intact.